Welcome. We are going to look at some fascinating teachings from my friend for the year, our friend haTurim, and our subject is the peril of power. So we're looking at Parshas Bamidbar. As I'm sure you know, Parshas Bamidbar deals primarily with the census of the Jewish people, also the urban planning, the positioning of the 12 tribes of Israel around the Mishkan, and a number of other related subjects. We have a reference to the particular role of the Levim, and actually that's where I would like to begin. So if you look with me at Perek Aleph, so we are in Bamidbar chapter 1, towards the end. I'm looking at Pasuk Nun. So that takes us to page 730 in the Art Scroll Chumash. V'dara Hashem l'Moshe lemor ach es matel Levi lo sifkod v'esroshom lo sisa. Do not count the tribe of Levi. Do not lift up their heads in the same way. In other words, to count them one by one. Besoch b'nei Israel. Because the tribe of Levi is distinct. It has a special tribe. We'll find out that the method of counting, which is from ages of 20 upward, was not applicable to the tribe of Levi. They counted their numbers from a much younger age, in fact, from the age of 30 days. And there are other differences as well. In any case, the Torah says don't count them, so to speak, together with everyone else. As part of this instruction to take the census doesn't apply to Bnei Levi. They are going to be addressed separately. But now it says in Pasuk Nun in verse 50, Va'ata hafkedes haleviim al mishkan ha'idus v'al kol kelav. Now he shall appoint the Levites over the temple of the testimony of all its utensils and everything that belongs to it. They shall carry the tabernacle and its utensils. They shall minister to it. They shall encamp around the tabernacle, around the Mishkan. So the Torah here says the Levim have a special location in the center of the camp around the Mishkan. They have a special responsibility for the Mishkan, which of course was the focal point of communal divine service. And the Levim, in brief, have a unique role and an elevated role, an exalted role. So with that in mind, take a look at the second word in the pasuk, Vata hafked es halevim. Hafked here is rendered in English, you shall appoint the Levim. But the word hafked means more than just to appoint them. It means to appoint them to a position of distinction, authority, you could even say superiority. The Baal HaTurim says that this word hafked is related to the word pakid, pekuda, pakad. We have actually many, many forms of that word, and they have a whole range of meanings, all of which are related. But the word hafked means to designate for a position of authority. Pukuda. The word mifaked in modern Hebrew, mifaked is a commanding officer. It's a person who has authority and he has, let's say, dominion over those who are under his care or his charge or under his authority. So says the Baal HaTurim, we find that word hafked appears only one other place in the whole of the Tanakh, and that is in a pasuk that's in Tehillim, hafked alav rasha. Hafked means to as I said, to appoint him in a position of authority. Hafked alav rasha means appoint over him a wicked person. It could be that the Yetzer Hara itself is dominates a person, or it could be, as probably according to the Pshat, that David HaMelech says about his enemies that they should be subject to some corrupt authority who will exploit them or harm them or punish them. David HaMelech is praying for the downfall of his enemies. But the particular context is not so significant as the words hafked alav rasha. So the Baal HaTurim says, because the word hafked in that particular formulation appears only in our pasuk and in that pasuk, so it tells us, he says, this relates to what it says in Chazal, that a person is not appointed as a shoter milamata ad shenasa rasha milamala. That a person who is a shoter, and modern English shoter is a policeman, a person doesn't achieve a position of lording his authority over others in this world unless he has been found wanting, or maybe in a similar way, it goes together with his wickedness in the eyes of heaven. This brings to mind the famous statement of the British statesman, power corrupts. Uh, Trying to remember who it was who said that, to whom it's attributed. Slips my mind at the moment. Anyway, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And this is what Chazal seem to mean. That a person who achieves power in this world, it's a sign of divine disfavor, or it's associated with his like contemptible behavior in the eyes of heaven. Um, I've got a problem because there's someone at the door and there's no one here other than me. I'm not going to get it though because I'm giving a sure. So the notes in the Bal HaTurim quote the Lashon, the language of the Rambam. The Rambam in his commentary on Pirkei Avot, chapter 1, Mishnah 10. There we have the phrase Snais Harabanus, hate lordship. And there the Rambam says that, just read a little bit to characterize it. The Rambam says that once a person has been made a chief in the lower world, he's made wicked in the upper world. And the Rambam says by seeking dominion and mastership, one will encounter tribulations and evils in this world. For as a consequence of other people's jealousy or enmity, he will rebel. They will rebel against him, and his faith in God will suffer. So, a person who achieves eminence or power in this world is likely to arouse resentment, jealousy, perhaps a hatred, perhaps enmity on the part of others, and he will come to strife. He will come to, a position of arguing and fighting with others. It's not going to end well for him. There's also like a play on words. Rosh is like to be the head. Rash is to become impoverished. So it's like a person becomes a Rosh in this world and he's impoverished milamala. Meiri says something similar in his comments in his commentary on the Mishnah, and he says that a person in authority will often come to abuse that authority, and he will instill excessive fear. He'll exploit the people under him, and as a result, they will pray for his downfall. It's not going to end well for him. Okay, that's what the Mefarshim say about that pasuk Hafked Alav Rasha, and about the Mishnah that we've just mentioned, that a person should not crave and should not desire positions of authority and power. But what's fascinating here is that the Bal HaTurim says that even our pasuk, which says Hafked is HaLeviim, the Leviim are point. This is a minui of mitzvah. This is a position of authority or prominence or eminence or prestige, which is prescribed by the Torah and which is a consequence of the fact that they are the tribe of Levi. In other words, you've got a certain person from the tribe of Levi. Why is he in a position of superior authority or eminence or prestige? It's not because of something he's done. It's not because he craves it or because he is, involved in Machiavellian endeavors to seize the position of eminence. It's because, as a member of the tribe of Levi, he is like assigned that role. Nevertheless, says the Baal HaTurim, the remez here is that even so, he needs to be aware of the pitfalls of the position of authority. It brings to mind a joke which I heard many years ago, but I remember it especially because I heard it from my Rosh Yeshiva. Even though I heard it before, I heard it from him as well. But I remember him telling it. I wish that I could remember all of the Torah that I learned from my Rosh Yeshiva as well. But this joke I definitely remember. A man comes to a town and he's trying to find a name of someone. He has the name of someone he wants to speak to, and he wants to know where he lives. So he says to the first yid that he finds, do you know where this certain person lives? So he says, what? Do you want to see this person? He's a scoundrel. He's a ne'er-do-well, the Rosh HaKahal, he's the head of the community. He's such a good for nothing. Yeah, go down to the other side of town and you can ask over there. So he walks down the road. He asks somebody, do you know where this certain person lives? He says, what, you want to speak to him? That scoundrel, that varlet, that knave. Yeah, you can find him on this particular street. He goes to the street and he starts asking, do you know which house belongs to this person? We want to see this person, the Rosh HaKahal, the one who's responsible for the community, the top dog. We hate him. He's corrupt. He's exploitative. He's a scoundrel, good for nothing, ne'er do well. Finally, he gets to the house, he knocks on the door, and he says to him, tell me, why are you the Rosh HaKahal? So he said, look, I've got to be honest, I do it for the kavod. Uh, I do it for the honor, because I crave the honor that comes with the position. So that which a person imagines brings honor can sometimes bring exactly the opposite, and as a result of which it can be lead to his downfall or certainly to his peril. So this we say the peril of power. So that's the first observation I wanted to share with you. Hafked is Haleviim. Appoint them to this position of authority, but it comes potentially at a cost with a significant risk factor. Now, if we turn just to the following page, I want to look at a pasuk near the beginning of Peril base. So in Peril base on page 732, if you're with me in the art scroll, Chumash, Vaydibar Adonai el Moshe vel Aharon lemor, Ish al diglo ba'osos teveis avosam yachnu b'nei Yisrael. The children of Israel shall encamp each man by the banner according to the insignias of his father's household. And the Torah sets out in this chapter the orientation of the camp of Israel, in which each tribe had its own position. The tribe of Levi encamped around the Mishkan, which was in the middle of the encampment, and each direction, each of the four directions, was occupied by three tribes. So we have a situation in which there are four wings, three tribes in each wing, but the three tribes are not in an, let's say, equal position, but rather each of the four wings, one tribe is designated as the leading tribe in that wing. So in the east, in the south, in the in the north, and in the west, we have, rather in the west, let me say that again, in the east, in the south, in the west, and in the north, we have three tribes each in each direction. And in each direction, one of the tribes is the leading tribe. Ishal diglo ba'osos teveis avosam. So here the Baal HaTurim makes a really interesting observation. He says, so Rashi already mentions that the positioning of these tribes was in accordance with the instructions of Yaakov. That Yaakov, Rashi says, if you've got Rashi there, you can take a look. Ba'os shemasar lehem Yaakov avihem. The os, when it says ba'osos with the signs with the insignia, Rashi says osos alludes to the sign, the indication that Yaakov provided on his deathbed when he said to his sons, I am dying here in Egypt, but don't leave me here. I don't want to be buried here. I would like to be buried in the cave of Machpelah in Hebron, because that's where I buried the other members of my family. That's where I buried Leah, etc. That's where I would like to be buried. And according to Chazal, the instructions included how his bier should be born. The 12 sons would carry him. Levi would not carry him, the others would carry him, each one in a certain position. So Rashi says that his sons did for him in accordance with his instructions. That Yehuda together with Yisachar and Zvulun will carry him on the east side. They will hold the coffin, hold the remains of Yaakov in the east. Veruven, Shimon, Vegad, Minadarom, etc. The interesting thing is that in accordance with Yaakov's instructions for the transportation of his remains to the land of Israel, that is how the Jewish people encamped. Generations later, when they finally left Mitzrayim and when they were arranged in the Midbar, that's how they encamped as well. Says, okay, this is well known. Says a Baal HaTurim, a fascinating observation. The four heads of the tribes are Yehuda is the head of the three in the east. Reuven is the head of the three in the south. Ephraim is the head of the three in the west. Yeah. And Dan is the head of the three in the north. Says the Baal haTurim that of the 12 sons of Yaakov, he addressed each of them on his deathbed and he blessed them. He blessed them in which he addressed each of them in turn. But an interesting observation is, that of the 12, 4 of them he addressed benochach. It means in second person. He addressed them directly. All of the others he spoke in the third person. So let's consider Yehuda. He said, I'm sorry, the first one of the 12, the firstborn, is Reuven, and he began, Reuven bechori ata, you are my firstborn. He says about Yehuda, ata yoducha achecha, you will be acknowledged by your brethren. So Reuven, he says, bechori ata. Yehudi says, ata yoducha achecha. Yosef, he says, me'el avicha v'ya'azreka, the God of your father has assisted you. Again, speaking to him directly. Even Dan, according to Baal haTurim, he says, Lishuascha kivisi Adonai, that I have like hoped for your salvation. Now, the truth is that Rashi, in his commentary there on that pasuk in Vayechi, Rashi says that Yaakov prayed to Hashem, Lishuascha kivisi Adonai, I hope for your salvation. Yaakov was saying it on behalf of a descendant of Dan, namely Shimshon, and he was praying for God's redemption. But according to Baal haTurim, and also Baal haTurim evidently agrees with Ibn Ezra and other, I think Rashbam as well, that Yaakov was saying Lishuascha, that he was addressing Dan, and he said, I pray to God for your salvation, Lishuascha, that you shall be saved. In which case, this fits into the schema that is presented by Baal haTurim, that the 4 heads, the 4 leading tribes in each of the 4 directions, were the only 4 that Yaakov addressed directly. Now, what he doesn't explain is why, indeed, was Dan designated as the head of the Degel, as the leading tribe in the wing, in the northern wing of the camp. Wasn't he the weak link? Because we find, and we'll see in a moment actually, but we find another number of other places that Dan was prone to idolatry. There are other indications about that as well. Dan was the weakest link. As I said, we'll see more about that in a moment. I just want to give a little advertisement that we're going to look at this in a much deeper level on Shabbos for those who are local to us. Please join us after the Kiddush on Shabbos. You can join us for davening and the Kiddush as well, because we have a Dvar Torah on that subject about the alternative redemption, because Dan actually had an important role, and although he seems to be the weakest link, there is a reason why Yaakov addressed him and why Yaakov positioned him as the leading tribe in the northern wing. Also, for those not coming to Kesher, if you're a local, you can come to the Shir at Mrs. Shisha, which is on Ridgeway 14. For those who are local, it's happening at 5:30, only for women though. So any women who would like to come are welcome at 5:30 at 14 the Ridgeway. I'm going to give the Shir at that time that will explain at a much deeper level the significance of Dan. But for the moment, we'll just leave it with the observation that the 4 tribes that were the leading tribes in each of the 4 wings were the same 4 that Yaakov addressed directly. Now, towards the end of this chapter, so I'm looking at Pasuk Lamed Aleph, so chapter 2, verse 31 on page 736, if you're with me in the art scroll. There we read, the following: Kol hapekudim lemachane Dan, ma'as 1,057,500 la'acharona yis'u lediglehem. All those counted in the tribe of Dan, 157 were 157,000. That is to say, 57. I'm sorry, 157,600. Was not 157,000. In any case, they were the last to journey according to their banners. That Dan was the last. He is la'acharona yisau. Now, this is a remez also to the stature of Dan, which was the lowest stature. Remember that Dan was the son of one of the maidservants. Of the 12 sons of Yaakov, 6 of them were the sons of Leah. 2 of them were the sons of Rachel. And actually, because Yosef became like a patriarch in his own right, Ephraim and Manasseh and Binyamin are derived from Rachel, the sons and grandsons of Rachel. So who is left? We have only the sons of the maidservants, of whom Zilpah had 2 and Bilhah had 2. Dan was one of the sons of Bilhah. So Dan was, again, the weak link. His stature was the least. His pedigree was the most humble. And it says, La'acharona, he would bring up the rear. So says the Baal HaTurim, the word La'acharona appears only one other place in Tanakh. You might consider the word La'acharona a pretty commonplace word, but actually in that particular conjugation, it only appears in one other place. Pasuk says, La'acharona yis'u, and the other place, Lo yeh lahem zikaron im shihiyu la'acharona. It's a pasuk in Koheles. There will be no memory of them among those who will be at the end. In other words, at the end, the pasuk in Koheles says they will disappear entirely. At the end, there'll be none left, probably of the wicked. Says the Baal HaTurim that the word la'acharona that's mentioned here evokes the association with Amalek. Why? Because it says later on in the book of Bamidbar, it says Reishis Goyim Amalek va'achariso Adei Oved. Amalek was the first of the nations, but in the end he will be lost entirely. He will be obliterated entirely, because that's milchama Lashem ba'Amalek midor dor, that ultimately Amalek will be destroyed. So Amalek will be destroyed in the end. Says the Baal HaTurim la'acharona, it means that Amalek is the one who preyed on Dan. Remember, what does it say about Amalek? All of the stragglers. Doesn't just mean the women who were pregnant or those who were slow moving, who were sort of lagging behind the rest of the camp. Rashi says it means necheshalim, those who were weak because of their spiritual weakness. Maybe even they were excluded by the Ananei HaKavod, the clouds would not allow them access to the rest of the camp because they were unworthy. Those were the people who were subject to the predations of Amalek. Says the Baal HaTurim, that was Shevet Dan. That's what it means. La'acharona, Dan was in the back. Dan was the last because they had with them Pesel Micha. They brought with them, in the tribe of Dan, the idol, the molten image of Micha, which is mentioned in the book of Shoftim, it's mentioned in the book of Judges. And according to our tradition, Micha was a member of the tribe of Dan who smuggled out an idol from Egypt, and he took it with him. And according to one opinion in the Medrash, he was responsible for the Chet HaEgel. So we find, and we find that Dan is associated with the most extreme, most egregious form of idolatry. We find that from the tribe of Dan was Yeravam ben Nevat. Actually, I'm not sure if he was from Dan. That I don't recall. I may be wrong about that. But Yeravam ben Nevat established 2 golden calves, and one of them was in the tribe of Dan. And all of that suggests that Dan, as I say, maybe euphemistically, was the weak link. And we have to wonder, why was he leading the Dego? So for that, you got to come to the Shir on Shabbos. But what's interesting here is that the Baal HaTurim adds that uh, that Amalek would attack Dan, and I don't want to say exactly, it's a bit let's say it's not family friendly, but it was very unpleasant. So Dan was the subject to the attacks of Amalek because of Pesel Micha. Balatrim adds Yeh lahem zikaron, in that pasuk. Yeh lahem zikaron, there will be for them a remembrance. It's Sofei Tevos. What are the last letters of those three words? Yeh lahem zikaron. Hey mem nun is Haman. Of course, alludes to Haman, who is perhaps the very most notorious descendant of the nation or the tribe of Amalek. But what's fascinating here is that Amalek is that Dan is likened to a lion. Dan, just like Yehuda is likened to a lion, Dan is also likened to a lion. Just as Yehuda is the tribe tasked with overseeing the construction of the Mishkan, Bitzalel was from the tribe of Yehuda. So his sidekick, or his companion, or his second in command, probably calling him a sidekick is not gracious, not fair, was Ahalia ben Achisamach Lamate Dan. So isn't it interesting that when it comes to building the Mishkan, the leading tribe, Yehuda, and the weakest tribe, Dan, collaborate? So Rashi says that, not here, but Rashi says it in Parshas Vayakhel. If you want to look it up, it's chapter 35, verse 34. 35, 34. Rashi there says, Meha Yerudin Shebeshvatim. Dan is from like the least of the tribes, probably the least of the tribes. Bibnei Hashvachos, of the sons of the maidservants, Kiloni Karshua Lifnei Dal, in order to show that Hashem doesn't esteem a person in accordance with his pedigree, in accordance with his birth, high birth or low birth, but rather Hashem evaluates a person according to who he is, according to his character, according to his capability, according to his achievements. And because Ahaliav was the most talented, was the most suitable, the most maybe righteous and deserving, so Hashem brought together the most distinguished tribe, Yehuda, with the least of the tribes, because there's no favoritism before heaven. That's what Rashi says. But Rabbeinu Bechaya takes it much further. Rabbeinu Bechaya says it wasn't just that, so to speak, Hashem is not concerned with high birth or otherwise. We find that when the Beis Hamikdash was built, we have a similar collaboration. And he says this is in order to show that the Mishkan was the product of the collaboration of Yehuda and Dan. Yehuda represents one form of leadership, and Dan represents possibly the opposite. I don't want to get too much further. First, our time is up. Second, I don't want to give away my share from Shabbos. But here we find again that Dan la'acharona, the fact that he is last, it alludes to the fact that he was attacked by Amalek because he was vulnerable because of Dan's dabbling with idolatry and association with idolatry. So here we have from the Baal HaTurim three insights, just to review them. Atahaf Kaid es Haleviim, and Baal HaTurim observes that the position of authority comes with a risk factor. Any person who's in charge, who is in a position of power, can go to his head. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And the chidush here is that even in terms of the Leviim, where their designation is min hashamayim and it's a minui shel mitzvah, the risk factor is still there. We learned about Ishal Diglo Ba'osos, the four tribes that were the leading tribes in each of the four wings were the same four sons that Yaakov addressed directly on his deathbed. And then we saw here La'acharona. La'acharona, there's a subtle association of Dan with Amalek, that Amalek preyed on Dan, as we've said. So this is the some insights from Baal haTurim, and I wish everybody a wonderful Shabbos and a wonderful Chag Kabbalah Satorah as well. I don't think we're going to get together, at least not in this forum, until after Shavuos. Mr. Hashem, we will look at some insights into Parshas Naso next Thursday night. But for now, I wish you a wonderful Shabbos and Chag Sameach.